So what's a smart city? For those of you that are engineers, technical people, there are more standards than you would ever want. When we started this work in 2012, maybe 3 of these standards existed. But today, as you can see, we have easily 30 on the page and easily 30 more not on the page that deal with everything from process to technical to strategic standards. So we're not missing standards. We're also not missing programs. UN Sustainable Development Goals give us policy objectives that tell us what we should be doing with climate change, cities, organizations, social structure. So again, we're not missing standards. We're not missing policies and programs. Those aren't the issues, which they were about 10 years ago. What we are missing is a sense of urgency. Our definition in 2012 was that we're using digital technology to improve what we call the triple bottom line standard of livability, workability, and sustainability. We've totally changed our definition today to extend it beyond technology to also include data and innovation. But we've really made a significant change in that we've gotten rid of the word improve and substituted it with accelerate. The problem you're having today is that we're not moving fast enough to solve the problems. And so in the United States alone, it's from concept to implementation as much as 4 years before you get a project off the ground. And the big problem we have in the United States and the Western world is death by pilot. McKinsey talks about, they did a study on pilots, and most cities love pilots because they're either not paying for them or they use somebody else's budget. They get a big PR release, but they don't solve the problem. And then they have to go through a whole second phase procurement. And I've worked with a number of cities of trying to get out of this pilot mentality into what can we do to accelerate the benefits. Also, another issue when you're dealing with cities, and cities themselves do it, is understanding that smart innovation, technology, and data is not the same thing as sustainable and resilient. There's a tremendous confluence of terms. People really don't understand that resiliency is significantly different than sustainability. And I'll mention now what I've really been spending a lot of time thinking about is a concept called anti-fragility from Nissim Taleb's most recent book, which goes way beyond resiliency and again is a whole different concept around outcomes. So to ground ourselves somewhat in the technology and then explain how cities see it, we're all familiar with where we started. I spent about 5 years in the smart grid. I spent about another 5 years working on semantic data projects. And then I came into the council and started working on IoT, data sharing, and now digital twins, all about digital transformation. As you all know, we started with simply sensors, that is passive reading of ambient data that was collected. Sensors collect. The big change in the last 10 years has been the price of these sensors have come down, and we've added switches and actuators. So now what we're doing, and we did a program with Nashville on this, which I mentioned, where DHS gave a whole session on the difference in the cost of sensors. So of course, if we bring down the cost of sensors, that means we can create much greater sensor arrays and collect more data. And this is a significant change in the last 10 years. And it's significant for digital twins because you have real-time biodirectionality. And that's really important in the end for what digital twins are trying to do in terms of creating not only a measurement and data collection, but also the ability to act. We're all familiar with the initial first descriptions of smart cities. You've probably seen as many graphics around smart streetlights as I have, streetlights telling us what's going on the road. The big difference now, 10 years in, is that everything is giving us data. Now, there are those that will tell you that we're going to have AVs within 5 years. I'm one of those people who believe it's going to take closer to 20 years. But the fact of the matter is we still have tremendous amounts of data now that is being produced by our infrastructure. Many of you in the digital twin space, and I'll talk about this later, come from the built environment. Not as much from transportation, but the built environment, both for buildings and utilities. And so, we're very familiar with buildings telling us their conditions. That is, what's going on within the building, building automation, and such. The big difference in the last 10 years, and I'm really going to focus on this, is really what's happening now is what's going on between the buildings. And I'll give you an example. We spent a lot of time working with Orange County, Florida. They have 1,300 buildings, and I'll give you a little vignette shortly. They also have 75 million visitors a year. So for them, what was important was not necessarily what was happening in each building. They have the third largest conference center in the world, but what was happening between the buildings. Where were people moving? How were they moving? How were they using space? What was their reaction to that space? That's what Orange County is interested in, not just what's happening within the building, but what's happening between all the buildings and what happens from the airport all the way to Disney or any other place that they may travel. So in 2012, we spent a lot of time talking about command and control. And there's some societies still in the world that's their primary focus for using IoT, AI, simulation, and visualization. It's about command and control. IBM started this process over 12 years ago. IBM was actually our first member back in 2012. So a lot of what happens today, and I actually have a problem with this, is that many solution providers see digital twins as just another form of command and control. And the problem you have is that when cities in the West, that's Europe, Australia, and the United States or Canada, and a solution provider comes to them with the same mentality, which is that we can do command and control, they're really not resonating with the city. That scares the heck out of a city. Now, there are some societies, obviously, where surveillance technologies, command and control are really important, but not in this society and not if you want to have sales in this in the United States. So this is actually what cities are looking for: integrated best of breed. This actually is the town of Cary. It's smart and connected community ecosystem for flood and water control. It won several awards. And if you'll notice the difference between the IBM command and control and this, that in this, there's 7 different solution providers, all the way from Microsoft to Dell Boomi to SAS, who we know really well, to Salesforce. And all of them, the big key was integrating the different applications with multiple data sets to provide an integrated best of breed solution. Now, an area where they still really didn't take the next step, which I think they would do now, is with visualization. Okay, so we still have dashboards that are pretty much reporting of data dashboards, just done in a different type of format. And the next step with anything like this would be simulation and visualization. But just to compare those two, this is the one where this is what US cities, European cities, Australian cities are looking for, and that is combining best of breed. So data centralization and federation leads to greater analysis and decision making and is important for digital twins functionality. Now, I think there can be a whole debate between centralization and federation. They're totally two different things. Centralization is a data lake. Federation would be more in line with the previous architecture I showed you. And when you're dealing with cities, and we'll talk about this somewhat a little bit later, you really have to look at data sharing or federation as the primary road in which you drive in on to get them to share data and to create analytics, visualization, simulation. But really the big change is treating data as a citywide asset. And I think that's one of the advantages of digital twin solution providers. They actually see the whole ecosystem as providing data, except for one glaring omission, which I'll talk about in a second. But this is the most precious resource the city has. People come to me almost every week talking about how they monetize city data, and I think they're actually missing the mark. I think this is more about how you can use the data for traditional digital twin benefits, such as optimization, prioritization. That's still where we are in terms of fully understanding the features of digital twins.